So that is your biggest expense, and most people again don't see this as a big expense because as their biggest expense. They think, okay, it's taxes. It is what it is. No, that's not the case. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel where we talk about health, wealth and happiness. Today's topic is about reducing your expenses, and I'm going to talk about this in sort of detailed steps here. So if I ask you to think about what's your biggest expense, what would you tell me? I'll give you a moment to think about it. What would you say is your biggest expense? If I had to bet on what you would say, most people would say that it would be your rent or your mortgage. Okay? But I'm going to tell you it's not. That's not your biggest expense. Your biggest expense is the amount of taxes that you pay. And why do I say this? Right? So I'm going to show you a little diagram that I bought. Excuse my whiteboard that I've sort of had to make up. I'm still at the construction site, so if there's any carpenters watching this, don't make fun of my wall here. Anyway, so I'm sure you guys have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. If you haven't, go read that book. If you haven't read his second book, which is Cashflow, Quadrant, I recommend that book as well. Those two books are awesome. So the second book covers his Cashflow Quadrant, where we've got the employees here, self-employed people here, we've got big business owners and investors. Okay, so we've got the people on the left and the people on the right. The difference here is the people on the left have got very little control. They've got some control, but they've got very little control on the amount of taxes that they pay. Because as an employee or as a self-employed person, you're more or less bound by what your job entails and so forth. Whereas these people make profits and revenues and losses, therefore they've got a lot of deductions and expenses, and they pay taxes on what's left over, not the gross amount. Okay, so that's the difference here. So the idea is, if you can, eventually try and move over to this side of the equation. And it took me a while to figure this out, and it does definitely make a difference. However, having said all of this, even if you are an employee today earning, whether you're earning $200,000 or $20,000, go and see a qualified accountant. If you can't afford a qualified accountant, that's fine. Go speak to a friend that's an accountant and brainstorm ideas on how you can sort of minimize the amount of tax that you pay legally. And, disclosure, this is not financial advice. This is just general advice. And think about ways on how you can sort of keep some of that money in your pocket instead of going to the tax man. Again, legally, right? There might be things that you don't know that you can do. Some government incentives that are available that you might not be taking advantage of. And same thing with a self-employed person. You should really have a professional accountant taking care of your books if you're a self-employed person. Obviously, big business, it's a no-brainer, and so forth. So that is your biggest expense, and most people again don't see this as a big expense because as their biggest expense. They think, okay, it's taxes. It is what it is. No, that's not the case. It shouldn't be the case. It's only been the case in the last 100 years or so. Prior to that, personal income taxes wasn't really a thing. Unless we go back to the times of the kings, where they sort of forced your hand and took it by force, right? So personal income taxes wasn't a thing. This is a relatively new thing that we've just become accustomed to, and that we've just accepted as a norm. Okay, so that's your number one expense. Try and do what you can to minimize that legally, because you want to stay out of a jail, and it's better that way. All right. Second thing is second biggest expense is obviously your rent or your mortgage. And this is an easy one, right? What can you do to minimize this? If you've got a mortgage, call up your bank and see if they can negotiate the rate. Okay, most people can. And what I do is I try and go online and see if there's any comparable rates out there, and I can go, hey, XYZ bank have got these rates available. What can you do? Otherwise, I'm going to switch. And you basically tell them, I've got the option. I've got this much equity on this property. I'm going to switch. Make me an offer, right? And even if they can sort of drop it by a 0.1%, it's thousands of dollars that you're saving. If you're renting, it's a little bit more hard. But if you've got sort of a rapport with the landlord or your property management company, and you've been a good tenant where you've sort of got that credibility where you've been there for a while, you haven't caused too much grief for the landlord and the property manager, they might not be able to give you a reduction, but at least they might prevent you from increasing the rent in the next 12 months. Okay, so at least that's a bonus. I know for a fact that I haven't increased my rents on some of my good tenants who've been there for an extended period of time, because I know they keep the place clean. They always pay their rent on time, and from my mindset, that's a big bonus for me, rather than getting someone else in doing the churn and going through that rigmarole. I'd rather keep a good one. Okay, it's simple. Okay, what else is there? The next one would be sort of utility, phone companies, gas companies, electricity, telecommunication companies. Give all of them a call. As a thing, every 6 to 12 months, I pick up the phone and I start calling them, the insurance companies, and go, hey, there's all these deals out there. What can you do? I've been with you for X amount of time. Do me a deal. And you can literally save thousands of dollars here by negotiating the rates. And what are you doing now? You might be able to, by cutting a bit here, cutting a bit there, you might be able to save a few $1,000s, maybe upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. The amount of things that you save here, I don't want you to go and buy a new vehicle, right? I want you to take that money and invest it into an appreciating asset, whatever that may be. And again, this is just general advice. You're going to have to sort of do your research on what that is based on your own risk profile, but invest those savings into an appreciating asset, and invest in yourself as well, right? Invest a portion of that. So if you've been able to save $1,000, invest $100 or $200 in yourself. What do I mean by that? Get yourself some good books. Subscribe to a financial newsletter that might be beneficial to you, right? This is just some examples. So do you get where I'm coming from this? So this is one side of the equation, and I know a lot of people cover this, reducing the expenses. And it's sort of bare bones on what we want to sort of start off with as, financial 101. And I never hear that people cover this, but the other side of the equation. So that's reducing the expenses. But there's the other side of the equation. What's the other side of the equation? The other side of the equation is, hey, what happens if we can sort of bump up the income here, or the amount of money that's coming in? So there's an amount of money going out. What happens if we can bump up the money coming in? And I've only heard one gentleman talk about this. It was a gentleman by the name of Jim Dornan years ago. And he goes, okay, so you got all of these expenses, but what happens if this amount starts, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, and it gets to the point where this number becomes completely irrelevant, and you're like going, oh, really? Is that the case? And I'm telling you, that's the case, right? It can happen. It's happened to me. Hasn't quadrupled, but it certainly doubled and tripled. right, within a few number of years. So it's definitely possible, to the point that the expenses, as long as you're wise about it. I mean, I sort of live below my means, or I live. I mean, look at my clothes. This is, I mean, obviously this is my working clothes. I'm an average person. I don't try and impress people. This is plain old me, right? Like my friends know me as, this is me. I haven't really changed the way I dressed in the last 20 years. Sure, if I'm going out, I'll dress up and shave and all that stuff. I'm in lockdown. I'm not going to shave. I can't be bothered. But you get get what I mean. So the point of this is, while you're doing that, maybe concentrate on getting your income up, and how you're going to get your income up. So there are a few things that you can do. Most people mentally think that they are forced to stay in the job that they're in currently. So you figure out what job you're in at the moment. And if you're passionate about the job and that's the career that you want to be in, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's a job for the sake of a job that you're staying in because you want to get a paycheck and you don't mind a career change, perhaps look at options in where your hourly rate might be higher. Okay, there are certain jobs that pay really, really well that don't require, a breaking back, or, that doesn't require too much stress. Let me try and think of some examples, okay? If you want to be a freelancer, I mean, again, it does depend on your skill set. So you do have to sort of have some sort of these skill sets, or develop a skill set, and you don't have to sort of come up with these overnight. So you can work on these over the next coming months, years, and develop these skills. That's what I said about, by saving some of these money, you can use some of those money to develop yourself, develop your own skills, and that way your earning power goes up, and therefore before you even know it, you've doubled, tripled and quadrupled your money, and sooner or later you've 10x'd it. Okay, this is what I'm sort of talking about. So I've sort of waffled on a little bit here, but that's one aspect of you switching from one job to another job, where you can find something. If you're not truly driven and you're there just for a paycheck, look for other areas or other sectors of the industry where you can actually find a job that will pay you better, basically. Okay, there definitely are. In Australia, we've got Seek.com. In America, there's obviously different websites out there, and UK and so forth. So depending on where you're watching this video, look on your local market, and actually, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I went into Seek.com. There's a filter there, and I put on, I want a job that's earning $200,000 or more. Search. A whole bunch of jobs came up. Okay, and I go, yeah, I can do that job, I can't do that job, and I sort of went up and I picked a few, and I go, I could do those jobs, and I started applying them, and you know what? Sometimes it works. So maybe that's a strategy that you want to try. That's one avenue. Okay, the other aspect is, I know everyone talks about these side hustles and all of this stuff. This is an interesting area because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. If you go online and look up side hustles, there's a whole bunch. I might actually make a separate video on side hustles that you can do. But this is just side income that you can actually do to earn extra income. But you're going to have to sort of work out what you want to do with that income, because what's our end game? We're going to have to go back to our end game. Our end game is to make sure that your passive income, the amount of income that you earn while you're sleeping, is more than your anyway expenses. Where are our expenses? Our expenses are on this side, right? So the amount of income that's coming while you sleep is more than your expenses. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So if you can accomplish that, you're laughing. Okay? I think I've covered a bit of material here. So step number one, we're going to try and reduce the expenses here. Call up your banks, telcos, insurance companies, your accountants, and do what you can to limit your expenses. Think about ideas on how you can boost up your income, either by switching jobs or going to a different sector. Maybe you might want to speak to a mentor or someone or a leader within your company and just sit down and just talk to them and brainstorm. And some people are genuinely want to help you. If they've been in the industry for a while and they're a few levels, try and speak to someone who's 10 years ahead of where you want to be, and they've got where you want to be, and they'll be able to give you a clear picture of how to get there. That's the best way to do it. And then the third step is look at side hustles. And again, I'm not going to cover side hustles in this video because it's going to be too long, but if you do a quick search, you can come up with a dozen ways to make extra cash and reinvest that money into different assets that will appreciate over time and eventually make that passive income grow, and that will that will be more than your fixed expenses. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.